Hello, my name is Barry. I'm a New York State licensed psychotherapist, and I'll tell you a little bit more at the end. But first, want to let you know that the topic for today, another case study, was the topic of incest and sexual abuse. I had a client of foreign origin, very beautiful woman, otherwise very together, intuitive, very bright, but very damaged. She was in a relationship, but was having enormous difficulty because all the issues that occurred growing up with her father kept coming to the surface. It stimulated lots of unreasonable and illogical rage, in circumstances that would not normally trigger these things, particularly circumstances that were loving and kind. And as the story developed, it turns out that for maybe 10, 12 years, until mid-teens, her father would have her come to bed with him, and he would like to sit in a chair and like to have her sit on his lap as a teenager. So it was a little more complicated than just that, because there was also abuse of her brother, which was more flagrant. But for her, and this is what we're talking about, there was a lot of fear, terror, anguish, a lot of memories that were either suppressed or repressed, but the damage was quite there. And that's why she came to see me, because she knew she carried this stuff. She remembered in general terms what happened, but really blanked out on a lot of the details. As you can imagine, when trauma is so great, you really don't want to remember. So the mind has a way of forgetting. So first thing we had to do was really delve down deep inside her psyche and to take a look and try to recover. Now, going the memory route was just not going to work, because that's the part was blanked out. So what we did is we took the route of following her feelings, her anguish, her fear, the constant anxiety whenever she was around a man, and particularly that which gets stimulated in a relationship. And as we worked more and more on her feelings, the feelings started becoming clearer, and they're located in certain chakras in her body. And then we went into those chakras and took a look, and she described the feelings. People can use all kinds of dimensions, whether it's color, weight, texture. Some people even have taste. Many different aspects. There's no right or wrong. It's just different ways people experience things. And as she started connecting with the feelings in the chakras, content started coming, and all of a sudden she started remembering more and more a lot of the first suppressed memories and then discussing it. There was a lot of emoting, as you can imagine. And when it came to the repressed memories, which she could not access, that I was able to go down into her subconscious, ask her subconscious, and the subconscious would inform me, and then I can report it back to her, which usually triggered, oh my God, really horrendous reactions, because these were the worst experiences that she had repressed beyond conscious access. And bringing it back to the conscious mind brought a lot of trauma up to the surface that had been heavily repressed. But what we also did is, besides her connecting with what she was carrying, I asked her to go into her father and get a sense what her father was experiencing when he was doing all of this. And after a struggle, because she really wanted nothing to do with him, she was able to go into his own subconscious and connect and see that it wasn't really all bad. He never actually penetrated her or fondled her in a way that was sexually inappropriate, but she deemed it as such. It was just a very, very intense affection. Like when he would put her on his lap, he would sometimes get an erection, but he didn't make any overt moves to her. So a lot of the trauma that she experienced was actually the inappropriateness of his actions and his behavior, rather than necessarily any actions that he did that could be deemed sexually predatory. But it doesn't really matter, because trauma is not an objective reality. Trauma is totally subjective. And if you're carrying trauma, it doesn't matter whether it actually happened or not. The trauma is real and it needs to be dealt with. Some people exaggerate, some people project. It's totally irrelevant. It's like going into past lives. It doesn't really matter whether this really was your life or not, but if it helps you to release stuff in the present, it's valid. The same thing when it's dealing with any kind of sexual abuse or incest, whether it happened or not is irrelevant. And she was able to start getting in touch more and more with her feelings. And in this particular case, she realized that her father, let's just say, had an inappropriate understanding of the way to show fondness to her children. It was just she and her brother. And eventually, she was able to start to release some of the fear and the anger and the hatred that she was carrying, understanding that when it comes to these type of situations, everybody is a victim. The perpetrator generally feels as much anguish and guilt as the victim, just from a different perspective. So this whole thing took place in about less than 6 months. And she was able to release a lot of her terror. We went feeling by feeling, chakra by chakra, getting in touch with memories, bringing it up to the surface, and helping her just let it go. Sometimes she was able to dissolve it, sometimes she could throw it out, sometimes it had to actually go into her system and help her to release it, or do it for her. There were some instances that her memories and experiences, the feelings were so powerful, she just couldn't handle them. So I would go in and start first removing the energy from the feelings, because once you remove the energy, the feelings really don't have that much power anymore. And then she could either remove the feeling herself, or I'd have to go in and just remove the feeling too. This is part of the energy work that I'm able to do. And after 6 months, she was pretty okay. It was amazing. She was absolutely astonished. This is the first time in her life she knew peace. I never actually met her brother, but his story was, I'm sure, much more traumatic. Because there, from what she recounted, there was actual sexual abuse. Hers was a very, very misguided sense of paternal love. But because it's not really, there's no way of understanding that, and because the feelings, regardless of the intention, the feelings are one of violation and abuse, one lives it as if it was intended. But the intention doesn't matter. It's all about the subjective understanding of what happened. And I'm not saying that there wasn't sexual abuse. Of course there was. Whether the father thought that he was just showing affection or not, it's definitely sexual abuse. And in cases where there was actual sexual abuse, penetration, rape, active incest, the trauma would go much deeper, but the process is basically the same. It's getting in touch with the feelings, going into the chakras, isolating, and stating out loud what one experienced. Again, from a totally subjective point of view, because the mind tends to distort things based on the trauma and experiences one has had, which doesn't make it any less valid, whether it actually occurred as remembered or not, but it still needs to be cleansed. The energy attached to these feelings have to be removed, and then ultimately the feeling removed. There can always remain an intellectual conceptualization of liking and disliking based on the experiences of the past. Just because you've had the trauma removed from the incestuous or abuse relationship doesn't mean once it's all gone and you're healed, you have to like the person who did it. You just don't have to hate them. You can just want to have nothing to do with them ever again. And that's perfectly okay. So, I hope that answers some of your questions on this hot button topic of how to handle situations that are both incestuous and or sexually abused. Of course, while the majority of victims have been women, that doesn't mean that men can't have it as well, as illustrated by her brother, who was definitely the victim of both. All right, so again, my name is Barry Naroff. I have a webpage that talks more about who I am and what I do. It's under Birthright Therapy. And if you want to write me directly, you have questions, comments, it's Barry at birthrighttherapy.com. Or you can just put something in the comment section under the video and questions or new topics you would like to see explored from my armatorium of experience. And I'd be glad to honor it the best that I can. If you like what you're hearing, please do subscribe. And if you want to be notified when new postings will be put up, please just hit that little button next to the subscribe that looks like a bell, and YouTube will notify you. So just to let you know, I do individuals, couples, do some family, but haven't in quite a while. And if you're interested, I also do readings. That's the more psychic part, where I just want to know your first name, and you get information about your life lessons, karmic patterns, major traumas, whatever is relevant for you. So thank you. Oh, and I do take insurance, but out of network. I'm not in network with any different insurers at the present time. So thank you very much. And until the next time, I shall depart.